Here's the fascinating thing. It almost doesn't look like a random operation, does it? Everything that we're able to examine of the universe is based on a 3% sample of what we can see. So I've got a big Swiss watch, and I can see its parts, but I can't see the mass that's holding it together. So our current models of the universe are based on 96 to 97% of forces and mass that we can't find. In 1929, Edwin Hubble discovered that the universe was stretching, it's expanding, and we know by the redshifts that the universe is accelerating. Now, before Hubble, there's only one other place I know of where you'll find talk about this business of the stretching of the heavens, and that would be in the Old Testament prophets. In fact, 17 times by my count. 17 times by guys separated by hundreds of years, all predicting that the universe was expanding. Those guys just seem to guess right an awful lot. Talk about redundancy. In fact, Isaiah in Isaiah 40:22 managed to say that the earth was round and that the heavens were stretching in the same sentence. You've probably heard it said by astronomers that they were shocked when it was first discovered that the universe was accelerating as opposed to de-accelerating. That's because this is exactly the reverse of what should happen if a big random space explosion had occurred. Shh, don't tell anyone I told you this. But the 73% of the dark energy that we invented at the same time that we discovered the universe was accelerating is to fix the problem that the 3% down here does exactly the opposite of what it should under the Big Bang model. Just thought I'd mention it. But before we start looking at a larger scope or a smaller scope, in this test of evolution, we're going to have to kick Mendel's laws of genetics out of the queue. They conflict with evolution. Now, Mendel was a contemporary of Charles Darwin. Both men lived and worked in roughly the same time period. Mendel's laws of genetics would go on to be, well, the practical day-to-day observable sciences that are used even this very hour that you're watching this video. They're dependent on sciences because they're observable. We can watch them day after day after day after day after day. Whereas Charles Darwin's theory of evolution would go on to violate lengthy lists of other sciences. For example, in Darwin's day, it was believed that life could spontaneously generate by many, many folks. For example, if a mold were to appear, perhaps it had spontaneously generated. Of course, we now know that spontaneous generation does not occur. It was Dr. A. Fleischmann, zoologist at Erlangen University, who stated, and I quote, "The theory of evolution suffers from the gravest of defects, which are more and more apparent as time advances. It can no longer square with practical scientific knowledge. The law of information systems. Information always has a source." Dr. David A. Kaufman, University of Florida, Gainesville, stated, "Evolution lacks a scientifically acceptable explanation for the source of the precisely planned coding within cells, without which there can be no proteins, hence no life." Specified complexity sort of goes hand in hand with the law of information systems. What you're looking at is specific information. Click, 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 click. It is not random, a little bit this way, a little bit that way. It is direct, streamlined instructions that build living biological organisms. Irreducible complexity. The entirety of that organism is comprised of organs and parts, all of which it needs. those parts are comprised of cells which require all of their parts. Those cells are run by digital software which require all of their coding from the information systems to run the inside of the cells. All of these parts are made of quantum particles, which are not random either. It is irreducibly complex from bottom to top. Statistical mathematics is not evolution's friend by any stretch of the imagination. Natural selection. If you have two dogs, bald dog, hairy dog, snowstorm comes through, environment changes, I lose my bald dog, I've got less dogs than I started with. Natural selection, or survival of the fittest, goes hand in hand with entropy. As environments change, resources go away, you see species drop off of the map. This is why we observe species die or leave, but we do not see new species become. Natural selection is not a friend of evolution. The fossil record. Tom Kemp of Oxford University stated, and I quote, "As is well known, most fossil species appear instantaneously in the fossil record." Genetic complexity, information theory. The truth is that if we were to really go through the entire list of places where there's a 180-degree conflict with evolution, we would be here for weeks. So I'm going to rip all of it out right this second, toss it to the side, level playing field. Let's put evolution to the test. It was in 1859 that Charles Darwin proposed the origin of species. Things evolve into other things. So see the dog, he jumped in the water and he is deciding he's going to sort of grow these fin-like things. See, so the dog ultimately turned into a whale. See how the theory works? Now, mind you, in 1859, when this was proposed by Darwin, it was believed at that time that a single cell was as complex as a ping pong ball. And God created great whales and every living creature that moves, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kinds. So here's one of the proposed charts or ascent transition lines for evolution, and you can see the drawing here is indicating that the fish is growing arms, which are going to form a different head and become a tail, and now it's getting fingers down here. The problems with this are intrinsic, beginning with, of course, the digital programming code of DNA is just like software coding for a program. If a program picks up any junk code, error code, or mutation code into any of the lines of its complete coding, it will by no means make a better program. Even a single human finger is beyond imagination in precision programming scope, but the problems are larger than even the genetics. For practical example, you may have heard it said that dinosaurs became birds. A bird's wings make the neck on the giraffe look like absolute child's play. You are talking about going from a functional leg on an animal into an apparatus, a functional apparatus that flies. If you took every piece of sophisticated military hardware for aviation that we have ever devised, collaborated them into one single entity or organism, you would be nowhere close to the sophistication of the systems on one single species of bird. Our best technology, some of it extremely impressive, but also in terms of practical reality, primitive, sort of clunky, as well as resource consuming, inefficient, and often very catastrophic by comparison to this creature right here. Majesty of just one of these biological masterpieces. The birds sort of make the whole flying thing look easy, don't they? Not to mention the fact that if you've got a leg becoming a wing, it's going to be a bad leg long before it makes a good wing. If an animal was mutating in any way, that's going to injure its chances for survival. Not one change of species into another is on record. We cannot prove that a single species has ever changed. That quote is from none other than Charles Darwin himself. Now, each program on this screen has exactly the coding inside of it that it needs at the very start. Otherwise, the program would not exist. So if I've got a monkey that is slowly turning into a person, there has to be actual cellular coding for every little tiny piece of the transition, just like these computer programs on this screen will only open to become what they are because their lines of software coding only have the specific line-for-line instructions to open and become whatever the program is. You need precise code for every single line, because just like computer software, this coding has no extra instructions for making spare parts. It has exactly inside those digital instructions the coding that it precisely needs to make the organism exactly as it is, with no spare coding. What do you imagine might occur if I took one of these programs on this screen and began adding random lines of mutant junk code to one of these programs on this screen? Would it increase and make the program evolve to become a better program? Or, option B, do you think that adding random code, junk code, and mutation code to precision genetic software might not ever get a dog to change body plans and all of its genetic coding and become a whale? So what do you think? If we were to add junk code to one of these pieces of software, one of these programs, does the program fall apart, or does it become a better program? And whatever the case, evolution is stating that random accidents in the precision genetic coding began to accidentally spit out every direction and every kind of creature and species on the planet Earth. Despite the entropy, biogenesis, and all of Mendel's laws of genetics, and also ignoring all of these basic day-to-day observable sciences, one would anticipate that the evidence for all of these transitions, which would have to occur, spitting out mutant animals and creatures in every conceivable direction, should be readily available and easy to find within the fossil record. Strangely though, the evidence on the entire face of the whole planet Earth for all of this science-defying activity seem to be primarily confined to this single set of monkey bones. Jeffrey Schwartz, in his book sudden origin stated, and I quote, "Given that evolution, according to Darwin, was in a continual state of motion, it follows logically that the fossil record should be rife with examples of transitional fossils leading from less to more evolved. Yet instead of filling in the gaps in the fossil record with so-called missing links, most paleontologists have found themselves in a situation where there are only gaps in the fossil record, with no evidence of transformational intermediate between documented fossil species." So despite just what Charles Darwin said in his own day, that there is no evidence of species changing from one to another, and the fossil record working to further illustrate that animals stay within their spectrums, not seeming to have fossils that change into one another. Ian Eldridge stated in his book, The Myths of Human Evolution, and I quote, "The fossil record flatly fails to substantiate the expectation of finely graded changes over time." The Russian silver fox experiments, going on now for more than 50 years, are one of the more beautiful examples of animals, in this case foxes, producing, limited to their genetic kinds, the array of variables and appearances within animal types. Look at this first silver fox here. Now look at this silver fox, as well as these cute little silver fox variations produced within the 50-year ongoing Russian silver fox experiments. This is commonly termed as microevolution, meaning that the species can work with pre-existing code within their animal kinds, which is grandly different than Darwinian evolution, where things are becoming other creatures and transforming. These animals are restricted within their animal kinds. Bottom line, this fox can have other variations of foxes, but its genetic coding does not contain the information to turn into a whale.